Welcome to our video, Creating a Spring Boot Microservice. We are going to use this article in my blog, and if you look below, you will find a link to this article. In order to create Spring Boot microservices, we recommend that you install the Spring Tools Studio. This is also known as STS. We provide a link to that. And this is the tools. Choose the operating system that you are using and download the appropriate one. Also, this video is going to be based on this microservice, which is an open source microservice that I published in GitHub. We will provide you with a link to this document, which will give you the links you need. If you haven't installed Java 11, watch this video here, and here is where you can download the Java 11. We are going to assume that you have done this and you've got Java 11 working on your computer. Having watched this video, you will be in a position to do that. But there's one thing that we need. As a commercial developer, I alternate between Java 8 at work and other versions of Java. I recommend that you do this as well. We need to set up an environment variable, and the easiest way to do that is to search for variable. And when you search for variable, it brings up this option here, edit the system environment variables. So click on that. Now we can see what we need. We need to create a Java 11, a Java 8, and a Java home. These are the three environment variables we need to create. And to do that, let's go here, and you would hit the new button and it will bring the pop-up. Now, since I already have them in my machine, I will just type edit. It will bring up the same pop-up. But these are the values. So having installed the OpenJDK 11 on my computer, I now will create a variable called Java 11 with the path for that. Also, other versions of Java that I work with, so I've created this environment variable Java_8, and there's the path to the Java 8 JDK. It's also OpenJDK. And then lastly, we need to create a Java home. This is the switching variable. The way I work is I don't put the path here. I just choose which version of Java I want inside percentages. This is in Windows. In Linux, if you're creating the environment variable, you will be using $. Having created and setting up my Java variable, I need to just verify that I have the right Java running. So I will say Java minus version. And you can see I have Java 11 running, so that's good enough. Now we can say OK, and now we are ready to start. Having installed Spring Tool Suite, STS, I'm now going to create a new microservice. So we say File, New, and we want a Spring Boot Starter project. I'm going to call it Application Form. I'm going to change the group here. I'm going to make it com.nico. By default, it came up with Java 11. Something else you need to be aware of is your package path. This is convenient for me. You would obviously create a package path suitable to the project you're working with. Next, we need to select the Spring Boot version. I'm going to use the 2.7.6 version. If you are working with databases, as we will be, it will give you different options here. So let's go through them. First of all, it also remembers what I did previously. So I will be selecting Spring Boot DevTools. I recommend you do that. Every time you make changes to the code while the code is running, it'll redeploy the changes automatically for you. So you don't have to stop and start it. There are exceptions to that when you do certain specific things. And then if you're looking for the databases, you see there MariaDB is the equivalent of MySQL or MySQL, depends on who you're talking to as to what they call it. But you can find all the databases here. So if you are working with Oracle, MySQL, you can select it here. And even if you're using H2 for testing, it's a database that runs in memory, which is very useful for testing your code. And then we navigate to the next, and now we can click on finished. And it will create us this project. Now we need to see what next we need to do. Having created that, we need to add certain dependencies to the POM. Now you saw I was selecting MySQL or whatever database you wanted. Well, you can also manually do that. You didn't have to select them there. You can manually do them. So I'm going to open the POM. It's this file here, pom.xml. We refer to this as the POM file. Let me close everything else. And you can see I've already got some databases in there because I selected them. But there are some useful things that I always add in my project. So this you will find useful. First of all, I want to be able to work with TimeLeaf. So that's a dependency I need. I also want to be able to work with the latest JUnit. So that's 3 more dependencies I need. And then these two are very useful, the Apache Commons and the Commons Codec. The codec is used if you want to base 64 encode and decode. Then you will use the Commons Codec. It's very useful for that. The other one that I always use is the Apache Commons. There's utilities for strings where you can test a string is null or a string is empty. It's got some nice features that I find extremely useful in my coding. So I would take all of this and put it into the POM. I'll place it over here. And then go to source and format. And then that tidies up the code. Having done that, we can now actually run this project. So let's right-click on this and say run as a Spring Boot app. It's going to build the code, compile it, and then after it's built it, it's launched it. So there the code is running. And there we are. And if we look over here, you can see it started, the Tomcat started on port 8080. What you need to know is that when you're working with microservices, by default, they come with a built-in Tomcat, and that's what launched here. However, when you go to the top of the POM file, you can see that we can package this as a WAR file. And packaging it as a WAR file will enable us to also deploy this on a Tomcat server as a web application. So it will run standalone, but it will also run as a web application. I will also put a link to my previous video that I did, where I showed how to deploy a microservice on the CentOS server, on a cloud service. And there I used the built-in Tomcat server that was built into the Spring Boot microservice. I have created the business dashboard. The reason why I want to do that is because there are some things that I need to show you. And since they are already on this microservice, you can get everything you need from this and steal it and put it into yours. You see here it says I need to create a properties file, application.properties. Now you will see that by default we only have the application.properties file, and that's there. It's empty, so you can put in there what you want. In my case, I would like to specify the port. If I want to use a different port, and I actually do, I want to use port 9090. So let's go in here and specify that. And let's change this from 8080 to 8090. And we'll call this something else. So we've changed the name to, or specified the name to application form. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to tell the microservice, the Tomcat, when it launches this, that there's going to be another property called application-dev properties. That is going to be the default application or the active profile. So it's going to launch whatever is inside there. So to do that, I need to go and say new file. So if we look at my dashboard project, there's an application -dev and an application -prod. Now, this is useful if you're working in an enterprise environment where you want to be able to have properties for running it on a dev server in your development environment. You may even have a UAT, application-UAT, so that you can do unit acceptance tests where the business does their acceptance tests of the code. And then finally, when the project is ready to deploy on your production server, then you would use application-prod. But for this, I'm not going to be deploying it on a production server, so this is good enough. And then in there, you want to put things that are specific for that environment. I'm now going to show you what I have in the other project. So these were the things we needed to put in to our application properties, as well as I said earlier, to change the port and the version. This you can also put in the dev and in the prod, because you could use a different port in the one environment and a different port in the other environment. And you may also want a version number. So when we create a jar, if we are using the dev environment or the production environment, it can create us jars with different version numbers. That can be useful. Or at least when we deploy it on the server, we can display the version number. The next thing that we want to do is we want to add a database to the application that's going to run in our microservice. You may have seen me do this earlier, where I added the H2, I added the MySQL. But if you hadn't done that, this is how you would do it. You would take these dependencies and you would add it to your POM. And then this is important. In the application dev properties and also in the application prod properties, you would copy this in there. Now, in the production, you will not use this localhost :3306. In other words, this is running in my test environment or even on my machine. I create a local database on my laptop, and this is how I access it. But in a production environment, you may have a separate server. So and the same with your test environment. You may have a separate database server. So that is why you need to change this accordingly. And then I have a root user and a password. Now, you would never use the root user and the root user's password in any environment on a server, because you are publishing this to a hacker and telling him this is how to break in. They would create you a separate user for the database and a separate password. The DBA would ensure that you can only insert records update records, that you can't drop and create tables and do catastrophic things to the database. Next, we want to add time leaf. Let's go and look at our page. And now it's pointing me to this project. So there's a folder inside the source main resources, and inside there I have a file called layouts.html. So let's go and open that. Resources, templates. So you need to create the templates folder, and then inside there you put the layouts. I'm going to be running this, but here we've given it the name that we want to publish on the pages, and also we've given it some things to put on top of the pages so that we can use the bootstrap to make our pages look pretty. And this has all got to do with using bootstrap, and this part here will now be the head. And notice it's a fragment called header task, so we add this fragment to our pages. So if we go now and look at the index page, you will see that we call these, you see here we have layouts and header. So that'll put that header into my page with the code fragments, and then this will display the home page. So let's run this, run as a Spring Boot app. And it started. And the application has started. I trust you found this useful. Please give us a like and subscribe to our channel so that our channel can grow. Thank you very much.